welcome to another video review. And today, first video review of the year, first game review of the year that I'm doing. As I'm kind of changing things up with the channel, I'm kind of not trying to cover every fucking game that comes out because there's just too many games for me to review, and I don't have the time I had, 5 or 6 years ago. But I'm reviewing the games that are important for me to play, important to me to talk about and review, have a conversation about. And the first one of these this year for me is the Dead Space remake. Dead Space is a fantastic series that unfortunately EA kind of really squandered, really fucked with back in the early 2010s. We had two really great games within Dead Space and Dead Space 2, and then everybody knows Dead Space 3 happened. The franchise really kind of fell off the wayside, and then EA pulled Visceral Games to make that Battlefield Hardline game, which was a weird thing already, and that kind of they just kind of ended that studio after that. Obviously, one of the creators of Dead Space, Glenn Schofield, will go on to make the Callisto Protocol, which unfortunately for me didn't pan out the way that I wanted that game to. I was really excited for that game until I started playing it. The melee combat is just preposterous, and I have it on my shelf. Maybe, after a year of updates or something, maybe I'll go back and try it again when I'm in the mood for something new that's a horror game. But for me, I played a couple hours. I just couldn't get into it because of that. And so because of that as well, I was excited for this Dead Space remake because it's been a long time for anything Dead Space. I mean, the last time I played anything Dead Space was probably the first or second year of the channel. I live streamed playing the first two games for Horror Fest on PC. That's the last time I've had an opportunity here to play Dead Space. I really haven't touched the series since. And so obviously this remake was announced, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, you look, if EA is looking at Capcom and seeing the success of Resident Evil 2 remake, Resident Evil 3 remake, and right around the corner we have Resident Evil 4 remake, these are very successful remakes for the modern era. So it makes sense to take something that was extremely popular and remake it for the modern era with Dead Space. And I have to say, this could have been a cash grab. This could have been a file save as 4K remaster, quote unquote. Dead Space remake is not. It's built from the ground up, new, kind of like Resident Evil 2 and 3 were. It's not going to be as shocking for a lot of people because you have to remember, Resident Evil 2 and 3 were PS1 games. This is a remake of a 360 game, so even though it has seriously been 15 years, which makes me feel really fucking old, it's been enough time that it was time for a remake, but still, that game's much more fresh, I think, in people's minds than Resident Evil 2 and 3 were because they were PS1 games. So here we have 2023's Dead Space remake made by Motive under EA, and it's fantastic. I really, I'll just say up front, I really don't have anything negative to say about it. Going into it, I was very worried about the idea of this game now. Isaac Clarke speaks. Famously in the first game, he was a silent protagonist, and they kind of just worked talking around him. That's not the case in the Dead Space remake. In the Dead Space remake, he is fully voiced by the voice actor that did his voice in 2 and in 3. The one really interesting element of the game is they took the actors that play him and the actress that plays his wife, and they aged them up to, I assume, whatever their current age would be. So Isaac Clarke in this game is looking a lot older. And that threw me for a loop at first when I panned the camera around and saw his face when I started the game, because I'm like, wow, that's kind of crazy. But honestly, it really doesn't matter. In this story, his age doesn't matter. So if you don't know anything about Dead Space, it's a phenomenal game that pulls elements from the Alien franchise. It pulls elements from like Event Horizon. It deals with kind of a religious cult. There's also an alien threat here, and it's all taking place on a ship, the Ishimura, and that ship is inhabited by these alien creatures called the Necromorphs. And I don't want to go too far in it because if there's anybody watching this video that's never played Dead Space, I don't want to spoil some of the big surprises and reveals in this game because I think they are still pretty impactful 15 years later and definitely worth your time if you've never played this series. But I think the thing that made such an impact on me 15 years ago and still does this day is how well it borrows those elements of Alien, Event Horizon, and kind of makes its own story around those different elements, and it all works and works incredibly well. This is very much a haunted house in space game, very much like you think of more recently. I mean, gosh, it's already been 10 years since this game came out, but Alien Isolation, you think of that. This is very much that haunted house in space, and it's fantastic through and through. The other thing I want to throw out there is they've made some really cool changes here. So famously in the original game, one of the big things that everybody hated was the specific sequence where you have to shoot down these asteroids. It's one of the fucking toughest achievements in that game. And that achievement, first of all, non-existent in this remake, but secondly, they've completely remade that part of the game, and it blew my fucking mind. So when you get to that point in the game, when you go and you open the shutter to go what I assumed was getting in the gun to shoot these asteroids, it opens up and you're outside, and you have to go recalibrate 3 guns, and then you use your aiming to aim these big guns, and you have to shoot down a couple asteroids, and then the gun recalibrates, you move on to the next one. But that's crazy. That is not at all what was in the original game. So I was really shocked when that gate opened and I got outside and I was like, what the fuck is happening? So there's a couple moments like that. The other thing that's really excellent about this remake, lighting plays such a big part in this remake, and it really adds to the atmosphere of the game in a way that I feel it back in 2008 they couldn't have the lighting the way that it is in this remake. It just looks spectacular. It adds a really spooky element to the game that really works wonders. And visually, I think another thing that's really important to note, this game is only on PS5, Series X, and Series S. There is no last-gen version of this game, and I'm happy to see that because I think there would have been a lot more sacrifices that would have had to have been made, and it would have been as good of an experience. So that being said, the game still has the same issues that it did 15 years ago. The final boss fight is kind of a whatever fight. There's one specific fight that's on the ship where you fight this Leviathan thing outside. That's a real pain in the ass part of the game. They didn't make that part of the game any better here in the remake, unfortunately. But it's another fine example of a game that is excellently paced, I think, from beginning to end. There's never a dull or low moment in this game. It's incredibly tense from beginning into the end. I highly recommend it. It is out now. Some people might argue the $70 price point. What I'll say is I played it on Series X. All the footage you're seeing is from the Series X. I bought it because I have Game Pass, which has EA Play, so you get like a 10% discount. So I basically saved $10 off of it. So that's what I did, and I didn't really care in this case about having a physical copy of this remake. More and more I'm starting to let go of the physical side of things as I start to realize a lot of these physical copies are just data discs that have nothing on them. They're just unlocking a key to download the game. So case in point, the Halo Infinite disc. So but it's worth your time if you're a horror fan, and for whatever reason, maybe 15 years ago you were like 2 years old and you've never played Dead Space. Highly recommend the game. I cannot stress enough how good the game is. For me, it's easy to give this score, but it's an A+. It's one of the greatest horror games of all time. This remake only accentuates how great that is. So A+ for me, highly recommended. I hope you guys enjoy this video review. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time.